This is a Sports Catastrophe production. Hey there, Heather, ho there. It's Jeff Cutter Diamond welcoming you to another Sports Catastrophe on the State. And on this day, August the 30th, in the year 1904, going way back, you'll be thinking, why going back way back to 1904? You'll find out. Anyway, it is the third Olympic Games in St. Louis. Of course, these Olympics would last for months because the Olympics were an afterthought to St. Louis because they were hosting the World's Fair, which used to be very fantastic. And practically by 1967, it was just nothing, although the one in Montreal was huge. So, anyway, the Olympics were basically a backstory to the World's Fair. But anyway, in St. Louis, they decided to have the marathon August the 30th. And it wouldn't be the whole 26 miles thing that we now know and love. It was 24 miles, 1,500 yards, or 40 kilometers. Unfortunately, it was run during the hottest part of the day on dusty country roads with minimal water supply. That's one big no-no after another. A, running it during the hottest part of the day, you can't do that. B, on dusty country roads. Bleh. And C, minimal water supply. Are you nuts? But this is 1904, before hydration stuff came in the public lexicon. Anyhow, 7 countries would bring 32 athletes: the US, France, Cuba, Greece, South Africa, Great Britain, and Canada. The only problem is the South African runners were basically runners plucked from an exhibit about African cultures. Of course, you know how racist things were back then. Anyway, only 14 out of 32 people would complete the race. Poor organization and officiating sucked. The actual, the first winner, the apparent winner, actually got disqualified for hitching a ride in a car. The actual winner was hallucinating by the end of the race, and the fourth place finisher had such an interesting backstory. I had some issues. So anyway, this would be huge and all of that. The 1904 Boston Marathon, the past 3 Boston Marathon winners, Sammy Mellor, John Lorden, and Michael Spring, would also be in the marathon, alongside Arthur L. Newton and a few others. So anyway, yeah, the marathon included the first 2 black Africans to compete in the Olympics, 2 men of the Tswana tribe, named Len Tenui and Young Mashahani, who were in St. Louis as part of the South African exhibit at the 1904 World's Fair. And they were actually long-distance message runners during the Boer War. Regardless of that, it was kind of awkward and all of that. So anyway, the marathon distance had not been standardized. It was only 24 miles. St. Louis decided to put it at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, whereas most modern marathons start in the early morning to take advantage of the cooler times of day. They would run 5 laps around the stadium track, and then they would go on dusty country roads, and race officials would ride in vehicles ahead of and behind the runners. Of course, this would actually separate the severely hot and humid conditions with the automobile. And, you know, the automobile wasn't really that long in the US in the first place. Temperatures were at 90 Fahrenheit or 32 Celsius at starting time. They had to alter the course because there were some roads that were washed out by rain. If only there was rain. And the course was not cleared of obstacles. The runners had to deal with cross-town traffic, delivery wagons, railroad trains, trolley cars, and even people walking their dogs. Regardless of that, it was huge. John Lorden, the 1903 Boston Marathon winner, was violently ill after 10 miles and then retired. While Sam Mellor, the 1902 Boston Marathon runner, was also overcome by the dust and was disoriented and dropped out of the race after 14.5 miles. William Garcia of the U.S. almost died too. He was found lying on the road along the marathon course unconscious with several internal injuries that had been caused by breathing the clouds of dust kicked up by the race official cars. Regardless of that, the first to arrive at the finish line after 3 hours and 13 minutes was Frederick Lawrence. He was hailed as the winner, had his photograph taken with Alice Roosevelt, who was the daughter of Theodore Roosevelt. Placing a wreath, Lawrence got a wreath on his head and was about to award him the gold medal when spectators ran and said that Lawrence had not run the whole race. Lawrence, who had suffered cramps, actually dropped out of the race after 9 miles and hitched a ride back to the stadium in a car, waving at spectators and runners alike during the ride. And the car broke down at the 19th mile. He re-entered the race and jogged across the finish line. Now that's pure deception. And these cars were like, not the fast move 80 km/h cars you see nowadays. These were like buggies of like 10 kilometers per hour or something like that. Race officials were not happy with it. Lawrence actually admitted his deception. Despite his claim he was playing a practical joke, the Amateur Athletic Union basically banned Lawrence for life. However, they changed their minds and gave him, it was just a 6-month ban by February 1905. And Lawrence formally apologized. What was weird was Frederick Lawrence actually won the 1905 Boston Marathon cleanly. So it was Thomas Hicks who was the winner of the event, although he was aided by various measures that would not have been permitted in later years. 10 miles from the finish, he was actually up by 1 mile by a few kilometers. But he had to be restrained from stopping and lying down by his trainers because he felt ill and all that. Hicks would get several doses of strychnine, a common rat poison, which stimulates the nervous system in small doses, mixed with brandy and egg white. He would battle onwards, hallucinating and could not walk. When he reached the stadium, his sport team carried him over the line, holding him in the air while he shuffled his feet as if he was still running. Hicks had to be carried off the track on a stretcher and might have died in the stadium had 4 doctors not treated him. He actually lost 8 pounds during the course of the marathon. So practically, the first guy to cross the finish line actually took a car there, a 1904 style car. And then the real winner actually would have been disqualified by modern standards for doping because of the strychnine, or rat poison. And his support team carried him over the line, which you can't do. But of course, there was a massive story of the 4th place runner, Aaron Carval. He arrived at the last minute. He was actually hoping to run all the way from Cuba up to the U.S., to St. Louis, to race in the marathon. He actually got caught out of his money gambling in New Orleans. So he would hitchhike to St. Louis and run the event in street clothes, which people cut around the legs to make them into shorts. Not having eaten in 40 hours, he saw a spectator eating 2 peaches. But the spectator declined. He stole both peaches and ran away. Later, he stopped by an orchard to eat some apples, which were rotten. He was strong with cramps and had to lie down and take a nap. Despite the discomfort and the pause, he still finished 4th. He almost won bronze. Albert Corey, who was a French immigrant to the United States, took silver. And Arthur Newton took bronze. The 2 South African entrants actually finished 9th and 12th. But Tenanye, who took 9th, would have done better if he had not been chased off course by wild dogs. The problem was the only 2 sources of water for the competitors were a water tower at the 6-mile mark and a well 12 miles down the road. James Everett Sullivan, for whom the Sullivan Award for Best Amateur in the U.S. is awarded to, was the chief organizer and did not set up any other water sources, even though that it was conducted in 32-degree heat over unpaved roads choked with dust. He actually had a reason. He was to conduct research on purposeful dehydration. So anyway, only 14 out of 32 starters completed the marathon. Hicks won gold, Corey silver, Newton bronze, Carnival 4th. Canada had one guy, Billy Shuring, who was a legend in Canadian running, and he did not even start. I don't know why he didn't even start. He could have helped Canada out. Yeah, he won the 19. Fortunately for Canada, he won the 1906 marathon and all that. So he did quite well, all that. But yeah, it just goes to show how poor planning of events can happen. We talk about it nowadays in modern times, but think about 1904, before TV, before even radio, when basically newspapers were king. And the fact of the matter that poor planning ruins everything. I mean, to have the marathon at start during a day of 32 Celsius, when you could have done it early in the morning, which would have helped things out. And then all of a sudden, you don't have good hydration things, although it's purposeful dehydration. And you had the first place runner across the line be disqualified for taking a car to the finish line. You had the real winner almost die because of the rat poison, and he could have been disqualified under modern rules. And that poor Cuban postman who actually took fourth. If it wasn't for those cramps, he probably would have won a medal. So anyway, that's just a lesson in bad preparation. Anyway, I'm going to do.